They always think you're slow when your hair turns gray. Like your ears stop working the moment your spine starts to bend. Like age is some kind of fog that rolls in and blurs your judgment. But my mind has always been sharp. My name is Virginia Collins, and at 78 I still remember every number, every document and every promise ever made in this family. Especially the ones broken. It started 2 months after I had a fall in the kitchen. I'd slipped on the edge of a dish towel and bruised my hip pretty bad. Nothing broken, thank the Lord, but enough to make my son Tyler start hovering. At first it felt sweet. He called more, checked in about my groceries, even started showing up on Sundays again. But then the visits got longer. The questions more invasive. Do you really think you should be handling all this paperwork, Mom? Maybe I should help manage the bills for a while. I waved it off, smiling. Tyler, I've been managing this house longer than you've been alive. But he didn't laugh. He just stared at the checkbook in my hand like it was a ticking bomb. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. I had just finished watering my roses when Tyler came over unannounced. He had that look on his face, the one he used to wear when he was about to admit to crashing the car in high school. Nervous but dressed up in fake confidence. "Hey Mom," he said, setting down a manila folder on the kitchen table like it was just a pizza coupon. "What's that?" I asked, not even sitting down yet. "Just a few forms, nothing serious. I talked to a lawyer friend. We thought it'd be good to have something in place, you know. Just in case something happens to you." I blinked at him. "Something like what?" He didn't answer right away. "It's just a power of attorney," he said finally, trying to sound casual. "You'd still be in control. This just lets me help manage things if you can't." There it was. "If you can't," I sat down across from the folder, my tea still steaming beside me. "Tyler," I said gently, "are you saying you don't think I can manage anymore?" No, he said too quickly. "Of course not. It's just responsible." I opened the folder. Legal forms. Highlighted spots where I was supposed to sign. My name printed neatly in boxes. His name right next to the word agent. Everything felt rehearsed. He had it all ready. There wasn't a single hesitation in his steps. Only in his words. "Did you talk to your sister about this?" I asked. "She said she trusts me to do what's best." I sipped my tea. "You mean she doesn't want to get involved?" He didn't deny it. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. "Let me think about it." He forced a smile. "Of course, take your time." But I could see the flash of disappointment in his eyes. He didn't want me to think. He wanted me to sign quickly, quietly, and without asking too many questions. That's when I knew. This wasn't about helping, it was about control. Later that evening, I pulled out my own manila folder, one I hadn't touched since Mark passed 5 years ago. It held our wills, the property deed, and an old power of attorney form Mark had drawn up, but never used. I sat at the dining table and reread every page. Slowly, carefully, as the sun dipped behind the trees outside. Tyler thought I was too old to manage, but what he didn't know, what no one in this family knew, was that after Mark died, I had quietly hired a lawyer of my own. A woman named Cynthia Hughes. Brilliant, tough, sharp as a tack. She helped me update the deed, move the house into a revocable trust under my full control, and most importantly, she drafted my own power of attorney form. One that named someone else, someone who wasn't trying to collect keys before the coffin was even built. I picked up the phone and called Cynthia the next morning. "Virginia," she answered, chipper as ever. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I think it's time we activated that plan we talked about." "Tyler?" "Tyler," I confirmed. "He brought me his own form yesterday." She chuckled. "Let me guess," he said, "it's just a precaution." I smiled. How did you know? Because I've seen this play before. Don't worry, we'll make sure the right document is recorded first. Quietly. And just like that, the wheels were in motion. The next Sunday, Tyler came by again, this time with a pen already in his hand. So, have you had a chance to look it over? I smiled as I poured him coffee. I have. His eyes lit up. Great, I can walk you through it. If you'd like. No need, I said, setting the cup in front of him. I had my lawyer look at it. His face twitched. Oh, he said carefully. You did? Yeah, she was very clear. She said I should be cautious. Cautious? He repeated. Of me? I sat down, calm as ever. Tyler, let me ask you something honestly. If I did sign your paper, what exactly would change? He shrugged. Nothing right away. I just have the ability to make decisions if something happened to you. Like sell the house? No, he said quickly, too quickly. Not without your permission, but with this form you could. I clarified. He didn't answer. That was all I needed. Well, I said, standing up. You don't need to worry about that. I already have a power of attorney in place. He blinked. What? I've had it for years, just in case. And no, it doesn't name you. His face went pale. Who then? I'm not obligated to tell you that. He stood up, clearly flustered now. I was just trying to help. I know, I said gently. But sometimes help isn't offered, it's enforced. And that's where the line gets drawn. He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised my hand to stop him. I love you, Tyler, but you don't get to manage my life just because I had a fall. He stared at me. And for the first time in years, he didn't look like the confident man in business suits. He looked like a boy who just got caught reaching into the cookie jar. That night I went to my garden, took off my gloves, and sat on the bench Mark built for me decades ago. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, soft and silver. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. Just reminded that when people start treating you like a burden, it's often because they've already counted your value in assets, not love. But I had more than assets. I had a voice. Tyler didn't come around much after that. The phone calls stopped. The checking in texts disappeared. It was like the moment he realized he wasn't going to be in control of my affairs. I became useless to him. Or maybe just harder to manipulate. I gave him space, but I watched closely. It's funny how quiet a house can get, even when it's not empty. The ticking of the hallway clock, the creak in the third stair, the rustle of the wind against the kitchen window. It all feels louder when you're the only one left to hear it. But loneliness wasn't new to me. Mark was gone. My daughter Claire had her own life 2 states away. And Tyler? Well, Tyler had changed the moment he got that promotion. The one that turned him from my boy into someone who wore suits that didn't wrinkle and spoke in half-truths. 2 weeks passed before I heard from him again. I was in the backyard tending to the marigolds when the sound of tires crunching on gravel made me pause. I looked up to see Tyler's black SUV pulling into the driveway. He got out, straightened his shirt, and walked up like he wasn't still bruised from our last conversation. Hey, Mom, he said lightly. As if nothing had happened, I dusted my hands off and nodded. Tyler, he stood there, hesitating like a man who wasn't sure if the welcome mat still applied to him. I wanted to check on you. You've been quiet. I smiled faintly. I've just been busy. My attorney and I have had a lot to work through. He twitched at that, but tried to play it off. Look, he said, I know I upset you. That wasn't my intention, wasn't it? I asked calmly. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to argue. I gestured to the porch swing. Then don't. Sit. He did, stiffly, like he was waiting for a meeting to begin. I brought out lemonade. Something I always used to do when he was a boy, and sat across from him. We talked, but it was small talk. Weather, the lawn, his job. I waited for the real reason he came. Finally, it surfaced. So, have you thought about what we talked about? About putting me on as your power of attorney? I stared at him. Tyler, I said, did you hear anything I said last time? I did, but I also talked to a few friends, and they all said it's normal for the kids to help their parents with these things, especially if you're getting older. Normal doesn't mean right, but let me ask you something, I said, cutting him off. If I gave you power of attorney, what would you do first? He blinked. What do you mean? I mean, right now, if you had that power, what's the first thing you'd change? He hesitated. Well, maybe set up a home nurse. You've had some trouble getting around. I nodded. And would you ask me first? Or just decide? Silence. That told me all I needed to know. That night, I called Cynthia again. I want to make a change, I told her. To the trust? She asked. No. To the backup power of attorney. You don't want Claire anymore? I want someone who isn't related, someone with no skin in the inheritance game. She paused for a moment. I have just the person. The next week, I met with Nora Davidson, a professional fiduciary. She was kind but firm, with glasses that sat low on her nose, and a file full of references. She didn't treat me like an old lady. She treated me like a client. I signed the papers, naming her my alternate power of attorney. If something ever happened to me, if I became truly unable to make decisions, Nora would take over. Not Tyler. Not Claire. Meantime, I kept control. When I told Claire about it, she said, I understand, Mom. I really do. I'm proud of you. When I told Tyler, he showed up the next day, red in the face. You replaced me with a stranger? I calmly poured coffee and slid his mug across the table. She's not a stranger to Cynthia. That's enough for me. But she's not family. That's the point, Tyler. He stood there shaking his head. I'm your son, Mom, and I'm your mother, not your property. He looked like he wanted to shout, but couldn't find the words. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said gently. I'm protecting myself because I've seen what happens to people who wait too long to do it. He left in a storm of disbelief. But that evening, I sat by the window, with my tea, watching the light fade across the backyard, and I didn't feel regret. I felt peace. A few days later, something strange happened. I got a phone call from the bank. A representative said someone had called pretending to be me, asking about my account balances. When they wouldn't answer his questions, he got angry and hung up. Do you know someone named Tyler Collins? She asked. Yes, we flagged the call, but you may want to be careful. I thanked her, and then I called Cynthia. It's starting, I told her. She didn't even need to ask what I meant. Don't worry, she said. We're already a step ahead. The next time Tyler came over, I was ready. But he didn't bring papers this time. He brought questions. Mom, he said, why are you doing this? Doing what? Making everything so hard. Why can't you just trust me? I looked him in the eye. Because trust isn't automatic. And because I watched you stop seeing me as a person the moment I stopped being useful to you. That's not true, isn't it? He said nothing. I stood. I love you, Tyler. But I won't be managed. Not now. Not ever. And if that makes me difficult in your eyes, so be it. He left. And I stood alone in my kitchen. But I was standing, on my own 2 feet, by choice. The days after Tyler's last visit felt like a standoff. Not a loud, shouting match kind of fight. No, this was quieter. Cold. Like a draft seeping through old windows. Constant and unwelcome. He hadn't called, texted, or stopped by. And I hadn't reached out either. I refused to chase someone who thought control was love. But that didn't mean I wasn't hurt. I had raised that boy, bathed his skinned knees, and packed his lunch with silly notes. I had cheered at his baseball games in the pouring rain. And now he looked at me like I was an obstacle, a stubborn gatekeeper to something he felt he deserved. The shift didn't happen overnight. It came in waves. After Mark died, Tyler started offering help with Bill. Then came the gentle suggestions about downsizing, just in case something happens. And finally, the power of attorney. That was the last straw. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. I'd started keeping a journal, not a diary. A log. Every conversation. Every odd phone call. Every time Tyler or someone on his behalf tried to interfere with my accounts. Cynthia said it would help in case we ever needed to go to court. And lately the entries were getting longer. June 3rd. Voicemail from Tyler asking again about the deed to the house. June 6th. Someone posing as me called the pharmacy asking for medical records. June 7th. Found Tyler's car parked across the street, didn't come in. Each little red flag waved harder than the last. That weekend, I invited Claire to visit. She arrived with a basket of blueberry muffins and a hug that lasted longer than usual. "I've been reading your texts," she said, "and I'm worried." I handed her the folder I'd compiled, copies of the journal entries, bank statements, even screenshots from when Tyler had tried to guess my online passwords. Claire read in silence, her eyes hardened. "I knew he was ambitious," she said. "But this," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I poured us both tea and sat across from her at the kitchen table. The same spot where I used to braid her hair before school. "I'm proud of you," she said suddenly. "You've been handling this like a pro." I chuckled. It's strange. People think growing old means becoming helpless. But all it really means is getting better at staying calm while the world tries to take what's yours. Claire reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Well, you've got me. Whatever you need." And that, more than any document, gave me strength. The next week, a letter arrived in the mail. Not a card, not a note. A typed letter, formal, addressed from a law office I didn't recognize. "Dear Ms. Hartley," it read, "our client, Mr. Tyler Collins, has expressed concern regarding your recent decisions in managing your estate." I stopped reading. My fingers went cold. My breath hitched in my throat. He had hired a lawyer not to sue. Not yet, but to inquire, to suggest I undergo a medical evaluation, to ensure I was of sound mind. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it had become. The moment I stopped handing over control, I became unstable. I called Cynthia, faxed her the letter. She called me back within the hour. "We've seen this before," she said. "They start with concern, then push for guardianship." "Over my own life?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "But don't worry, you're ahead of them. You have documentation. You have witnesses. And most importantly, you have a plan." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Let's fight," I said. The following Monday, I met with Dr. Amy Morales, a geriatric psychologist. We'd scheduled a cognitive evaluation weeks earlier, on Cynthia's advice, not because I feared I was losing my mind, but because I knew someone would try to say I was. Dr. Morales was kind, patient, asked me questions about memory, logic, daily routines. She held up pictures, asked me to repeat sequences, told me stories and asked me to retell them in my own words. At the end, she smiled. "Margaret, you're sharper than half the people I see in this office. If anything, you're underestimating yourself." "Can you put that in writing?" I asked. She laughed. "Already done." That same afternoon, I went back to the bank. I updated my emergency contacts, removed Tyler completely, replaced him with Claire. I handed the manager my new power of attorney documents and trust paperwork. She skimmed them and nodded. "You're taking all the right steps," she said. I've had good advice, I replied. That night, the phone rang. I recognized the number. Tyler. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, some stubborn motherly part, picked it up. Hello? There was a pause, then his voice. Why are you doing this? Doing what, Tyler? Trying to make me look like the bad guy. Do you have any idea what this is doing to our family? I closed my eyes, counted to 3. I didn't hire a lawyer to question your mental state, Tyler. You did. You left me no choice. Because I won't give you control of my life. Because you're making reckless decisions. I kept my voice even. Protecting my independence isn't reckless. It's responsible. I'm your son, Mom. And I'm your mother, and I deserve respect, not manipulation. He fell silent. I waited. Then softly, he said, You're going to regret this. And he hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I opened my drawer, took out the letter from his attorney, and clipped it to my growing folder. Next to it, I added Dr. Morales's report. Stamped, sealed, and signed. I smiled to myself. Let them try. I wasn't the one who should be worried. The sun was barely up when I opened my front door and found a manila envelope resting on the doormat. Not mailed, not handed over in person. Just left there, like a warning or a threat, depending on how you looked at it. The handwriting on the front read, For Margaret. No postage, no return address. I brought it inside with my gloves still on. Something about the whole thing made my fingers tingle. Not with cold, but with suspicion. Inside was a letter from Tyler. Handwritten. It wasn't apologetic. It wasn't even polite. It was a page and a half of guilt-tripping, legal posturing, and just enough passive-aggressive language to sound like he was concerned without ever admitting what he'd done. I just want what's best for you, Mom. You need to start trusting me again. I never meant to scare you with that lawyer. It was just a precaution. And at the bottom, folded inside, was a brand new power of attorney form, already filled out, with his name typed neatly at the top. He'd even left me a pen. I stood there, in my kitchen, staring at the packet, and that pen, as if signing it would somehow erase everything he'd already done. As if all my careful planning, all my meetings with Cynthia, all the nights I'd sat awake wondering how I could be so betrayed by my own son, would be undone with a signature. I placed the envelope in the shredder without a second thought, watched it disappear line by line. The next day, Claire came by to help me organize the files for the trust. We sat together at the dining table, her laptop open, papers spread out between us. I can't believe he just left that at your door, she said. I can, I replied. He's trying to make it look like I'm the unreasonable one. She shook her head. Do you think he's planning something bigger? Claire, honey, I said, reaching for my tea. I don't think Tyler plans anything. He tests. He pokes. He waits to see how much he can get away with. And I've let it happen for far too long. She leaned back in her chair. So what now? Now, I said, we close the doors. He thinks are still open. That Friday, I updated the title of the house. With Cynthia's help, we filed a quitclaim deed that moved the property officially into the Hartley family trust. Not just in my name, but protected under the clauses we'd crafted. Tyler would need a court order to even touch it now. I even added a special clause. If anyone tried to obtain power of attorney through coercion or deception, they'd be immediately disqualified from receiving anything in my estate. It was my quiet way of saying, I see you coming, and I've already built the wall. Sunday dinner came around, and I wasn't surprised when Tyler showed up uninvited. He had that smile on, the one he wore when he was younger, and got caught doing something wrong, but thought he could charm his way out of it. Hey, Mom, he said, kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. Claire raised an eyebrow from across the room. I brought dessert, he added, holding up a grocery store cake. I forced a smile. That's thoughtful. Dinner was tense. He tried small talk, asked about my garden, talked about his new business idea. Something about flipping houses with investors. Claire didn't say much. She just watched. Listened. When dessert came out, I sat down and placed a manila folder on the table. The same kind he'd left on my doorstep. Tyler glanced at it. Then at me. "What's this?" he asked. I smiled gently. "Just some documents I thought you should see." He opened the folder and saw the deed transfer, the trust papers, and on top, the cognitive evaluation from Dr. Morales. His face changed. Subtle. But there, a small twitch in the jaw, the flicker of surprise behind his eyes. "This is," he started. "It's all legal," I said. "And final. You won't need to worry about my decisions anymore." He closed the folder slowly. "Are you serious?" he said quietly. "I've never been more serious in my life." He looked at Claire, then at me, then stood up from the table. "You think you're punishing me, but you're just hurting yourself," he muttered. "No," I said calmly. "I'm finally protecting myself." He left without finishing dessert. The house felt calmer that night. I sat in the living room, crocheting while Claire did the dishes. The quiet was peaceful, not heavy. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was walking through a minefield in my own home. Claire came and sat next to me. "You did good, Grandma," she said. I smiled. "I just wish it didn't have to be this way." "I know, but you're teaching all of us something important." "What's that?" "That boundaries don't stop being important just because someone shares your blood." I reached over and held her hand. She was right. Later that week, Cynthia called to check in. "Any pushback?" she asked. "He stormed out of Sunday dinner, but no fireworks yet." "Good. That means he's thinking. You've built a solid legal wall. You're protected, Margaret." "Thank you," I said softly, "for seeing me as someone worth protecting." She paused, then said something I hadn't expected. "You're not just worth protecting. You're setting an example for every older person who's ever been bullied into silence." That stayed with me, because she was right. Too many people assume age equals weakness, that kindness means permission, that love must always come without limits. But I had limits, and I was done pretending I didn't. The next morning, another letter came. But this time, it wasn't from Tyler. It was from his attorney, a formal withdrawal of representation. No explanation, just a signature and a stamp. I smiled. Maybe they realized there was no case, or maybe Tyler had finally run out of excuses. Either way, I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat on the porch, and let the morning sun warm my face. I wasn't done healing, but I was safe, and for now, that was enough. By Tuesday morning, I had made 3 copies of every important document: the trust papers, the deed transfer, the updated will, and the signed evaluations from Dr. Morales, confirming my full cognitive ability. 1 copy stayed in the safe, 1 went to Cynthia, and 1 I left in a sealed envelope labeled "in case of emergency" in Claire's drawer. I knew Tyler wasn't done. Boys like him never go away quiet. Not when they're used to controlling the conversation. The calls started again, first with silence, then hang up, then messages from unfamiliar numbers. "Hi, Margaret. Just checking in. You know you don't have to make things difficult." One even said, "Don't do something you'll regret." Regret? I had lived a life full of choices I second-guessed, staying quiet when I should have spoken, making excuses for my children when they disrespected me, letting Tyler walk over my boundaries like they were just lines drawn in sand. But this, no, this I would never regret. That afternoon, I went to the pharmacy. It was a small errand. I needed my blood pressure pills refilled, and some denture adhesive. Simple things, everyday things. And yet, as I stood in line, I felt a hand tap me on the shoulder. It was Donna Melton, from church. She wore a scarf around her neck and red lipstick that didn't quite match her outfit. But she always meant well. "Margaret," she said in a hushed voice, Is everything all right with Tyler? I blinked. Why do you ask? Well, she whispered, leaning closer. He's been saying you're not yourself lately. That you're confused. Maybe shouldn't be alone. I stared at her for a long moment. And then I smiled. Just enough to be polite. Donna, I said, next time he says something like that, tell him I'm lucid enough to know how to draft a living trust, file a deed, and report slander. All in 1 week. Her eyes widened. I left her standing there with her hand on her shopping cart, and her mouth half open. When I got home, Claire was sitting on the porch with a strange look on her face. What is it? I asked, setting down my purse. She handed me her phone. A screenshot was pulled up. It was a post Tyler had made online. Trying to care for aging parents is no joke, especially when they don't realize they're slipping. Just wish I had more help. Caretaker struggles. I stared at it. My heart didn't race. My breath didn't catch. I just felt cold. He's trying to make people doubt you before he makes his next move, Claire said. I nodded. It's okay. Okay? She frowned. That's slander. No, sweetheart. It's fear, and fear makes people loud. She looked confused, so I reached into my bag and pulled out my own envelope. What's that? She asked. My turn to be loud, just in a quieter way. I scheduled a meeting with Cynthia the next morning. We prepared a cease and desist letter, not threatening, just firm, just enough to let Tyler know he was walking a legal line. We attached screenshots of his post, mentioned the evaluations and trust filing. I want this delivered to his work, I said. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Let him explain it to his boss. Her lips twitched. You're scary when you're quiet. I've had a lifetime to learn the art. Claire and I dropped it off together. She waited in the car, nervously drumming her fingers on the steering wheel while I walked into the office building Tyler worked at. The receptionist wore a tight bun and fake concern. He's in a meeting, she said. I smiled sweetly. Just make sure he gets this. It's very time sensitive. And I walked out. Claire asked me if I felt better. I told her I didn't feel anything, but that wasn't true. I felt grounded, clear. 2 days later, Claire got a call from one of her friends. Apparently Tyler had deleted the post. Not only that, but his profile had gone private. Then something else happened. He came to the house, not to yell, not to argue. He knocked, gently, and waited. I opened the door. He looked tired, more than tired. Hollow. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside, not as a welcome but as permission. He sat in the living room like a stranger visiting for the first time. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said. I believe that, I said. I think you meant to go even further. He winced. I thought I was protecting you, he offered. No, Tyler. You were trying to control me. He didn't deny it. He just sat there. I messed up, he said finally. I lost the plot. I didn't say anything. I waited. I shouldn't have posted what I did, or tried to scare you with paperwork. That was wrong. Still, I said nothing. I understand if you don't trust me. He hesitated. I just don't want this to be permanent. I looked at him. Really looked. And what I saw was a man who'd finally run out of justifications, who realized the tools he used to manipulate, charm, guilt, power, no longer worked on the woman in front of him. I accept your apology, I said. But that doesn't undo the choices you made. He nodded slowly. I'll go, he said. I think that's best. That night, I sat on the porch again. Claire brought me some tea and wrapped a blanket around my shoulder. He looked like a little boy, she said. He always has, I replied. That's the problem. Claire looked thoughtful. You know, she said, he might try again someday. I know, I said. That's why everything's in writing now. And we sat in silence, watching the sun go down over the edge of the trees. Because sometimes the biggest statement you can make is simply not backing down. The leaves had started to turn gold by the time the court date arrived. It wasn't a criminal hearing, nothing dramatic, but Tyler had filed a petition with the county, requesting a review of capacity, a backhanded way of questioning my mental state, and potentially contesting the trust I'd established. He called it a precaution. I called it a final attempt to pull the steering wheel from the passenger seat. Cynthia said we didn't have to show up. The paperwork spoke for itself. But I wanted to go. I needed to sit in that room. Not to argue. Not to raise my voice. Just to be seen. Not as some doddering old woman who'd lost her grip, but as a woman who had finally taken it back. Claire drove me that morning. She wore a navy blazer and pulled her hair back tight, like she was ready for a courtroom drama. I kept things simple. A gray sweater, pressed slacks, the same pearl earrings Mark had given me on our 40th anniversary. "You okay?" she asked as we pulled into the courthouse parking lot. I nodded. "I've survived worse than a courtroom." She squeezed my hand. Inside, the courtroom was small, almost disappointingly so. The kind you'd pass by in a government building and never think twice about. Beige walls, buzzing lights, uncomfortable chairs. Tyler sat at the front with his lawyer. He wore a blue suit and a look that couldn't decide if it was regret or determination. When he saw me walk in with Claire and Cynthia, his face dropped. I didn't smile. I simply walked past him, my head held high, and took my seat. The judge was a woman named Honorable Marla Henson. Late 50s, glasses perched on the end of her nose, and a gaze that could flatten a man twice her size. She opened the file, glanced at both parties, and sighed. "Hartley," she said, her voice clipped. "You're requesting a review of your mother's mental capacity based on what evidence?" Tyler's lawyer cleared his throat. "We're concerned she may be the victim of undue influence, that some of these legal decisions may have been made without her full understanding." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" she asked. "Stephen Black, Your Honor." "Mr. Black, I have here a notarized psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Elaine Morales, a cognitive behavioral specialist, affirming Mrs. Hartley's full capacity. I also have a video recording of her signing the trust, witnessed by a third party and the attorney of record, who is present." She looked at Cynthia. Cynthia stood, calm as ever. "All accurate, Your Honor." "Thank you. Please sit." Judge Henson turned to Tyler. "Mr. Hartley, have you personally observed any behavior that would lead you to question your mother's mental fitness?" Tyler shifted in his seat. "She's been different," he said weakly. "Secretive, refusing help, paranoid maybe." The judge closed the folder. "Or," she said, "perhaps she's finally setting boundaries you're not used to." The courtroom fell into silence. I didn't speak for most of the hearing. I didn't need to. Cynthia handled everything with precision, citing the documents, the dates, the clarity of each decision I'd made. When the judge finally turned to me, she gave a small, respectful nod. "Mrs. Hartley, is there anything you'd like to say before I dismiss this?" I stood up, not rushed. I took my time. Let the weight of the moment settle before I spoke. "Yes," I said. "I raised my son to believe in kindness, in truth, in family. I also raised him to respect others, including his elders. If he has forgotten that, I'm sorry for him. But I have not forgotten who I am. I'm not a child. I'm not confused. I'm not senile. I'm a woman who knows when enough is enough, and I will no longer apologize for protecting what I've built. There was no applause, just the sound of a gavel. Petition denied, the judge said. This matter is closed. Tyler left the courtroom without a word. He brushed past Claire, past me, didn't even look back. But I saw the way his shoulders hunched, the way he avoided everyone's eyes. That was the walk of a man who'd lost control, not over a house or an inheritance, but over the story he'd told himself, that he could still manipulate his mother, that her silence meant surrender. Later that night, Claire and I sat by the fireplace. She had made hot cocoa, the real kind with melted chocolate and a dash of cinnamon. The kind Mark used to love. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth settle into my bones. You were incredible, she said softly. I was prepared, I replied. She tilted her head. Same thing, really. We didn't speak for a while. Just let the fire crackle and the world turn without us for a bit. The next day, a package arrived on the porch. No return address, but I knew who it was from. Inside was a photo album, old pictures, me and Tyler. Him on my lap, me teaching him how to ride a bike, holding his hand at his graduation, cooking at Thanksgiving, and on the last page, a note. I don't know when I stopped seeing you as a person. I'm sorry. I won't ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I remember. I closed the album, set it on the shelf. Didn't cry, just felt finished. Not the bitter kind of ending, but the solid kind. The kind you can build peace on. A week passed. No phone calls from Tyler. No unexpected knocks on the door. Just silence. Heavy, but not hostile. Like a quiet forest after a storm. I had spent the last few days clearing out the attic. Old boxes, clothes no one wore, papers yellowed by time. Among the clutter, I found Mark's old journal. He never kept much, but every once in a while, he'd jot down a thought or two, quiet wisdom in shaky handwriting. One line caught my eye. Sometimes love looks like letting go, not because you stopped caring, but because they stopped listening. I sat with that for a long time. Then that Friday morning, Claire came over with a stack of letters. Not from Tyler, from people I hadn't heard from in years. Neighbors, church friends, even an old student I used to tutor in math, back in the 90s. I saw your name in the hearing docket. One letter began, if anyone's earned the right to protect her peace, it's you. Another said, thank you for reminding us that age does not mean weakness. These weren't just words, they were salve, gentle proof that standing up for yourself, even when your voice shakes, can echo further than you think. That afternoon, I sat down to write, not a journal, not legal paper, a letter to Tyler. Not because I owed him anything, but because I needed to free the last piece of myself, still tethered to hope. Tyler, you once asked me why I changed the locks, why I created a trust, why I took the steps I did without telling you first. The answer is simple. You stopped seeing me as someone who needed protecting and started seeing me as someone you could control. I never wanted to push you away. I wanted you to remember who raised you, the woman who carried you through sickness, who worked double shifts to keep you fed, who gave you a home long before it was made of bricks and title deeds. You forgot that. Or maybe you just stopped caring. Either way, I remember. I'm not writing to reopen the door. I'm writing to close it. Peacefully. I wish you a life of clarity. I hope one day, if your own children treat you like I was treated, you will remember this letter. And maybe then, you'll understand. I have forgiven you, but I have not forgotten. Mom, I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, but I didn't mail it. I placed it in the safe. Some things are meant to be said, not sent. That Sunday, Claire helped me host a small brunch, just a few close friends. Beverly from church, Mr. Ruiz from down the street, and even Lily, my late friend Edna's granddaughter, who'd grown into a kind-spirited young woman. They brought fresh biscuits, jam, and laughter. I hadn't heard that much laughter in my kitchen in years. At one point, Mr. Ruiz said, "You know, Margaret, this house feels lighter now." I smiled. That's because it is. No more tension in the walls. No more watching my words at dinner. No more waiting for Tyler to walk in like a thundercloud. Just warmth. Just choice. That night, I stood at the back porch. The wind rustled the trees. The sky was painted in orange and purple streaks. I could smell the garden blooming again. Everything felt alive. Claire came up behind me. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded. Not out of regret, just wondering if he ever really knew me. She didn't push, just stood with me as the sun went down. 2 days later, I got a voicemail. It wasn't Tyler. It was his daughter, Hannah, my granddaughter. "Hi, Grandma. It's Hannah. I don't really know what's going on, but I miss you. I remember when you used to braid my hair and tell me stories about when you were my age. I'm older now, but I still remember. I hope you're okay." Her voice cracked on the last word. I played it 3 times, then saved it. I wrote back to her, "Dear Hannah, thank you for remembering. That's more than most do. I'd love to see you again when the time is right. Maybe we can braid each other's hair this time. I'll make lemon bars. Your favorite, right? Love, Grandma." I didn't tell her what her father had done. That wasn't for her to carry. She'd find out in her own time. For now, all she needed to know was that the door to my heart was still open. Just not to everyone. That weekend I cleaned out the last room in the house. The guest bedroom that Tyler had once insisted should be for emergencies. I repainted the walls a soft sage green, bought new curtains, set up a small writing desk and filled the drawers with blank notebooks and fresh pens. It was no longer a just-in-case room. It was mine, for journaling, for tea, for visits with people who remembered who I was. That's what healing looks like. Not a grand parade, not a courtroom win, but a quiet space that used to be haunted, now blooming again. I closed the door to the room, sat down with a cup of tea, and smiled. Some losses are really gifts, wrapped in hard truth and silent night. And sometimes, the only power you need is your own signature on the right line. The spring rain came early that year. It tapped gently on the windows and soaked the flower beds I'd just replanted. Daffodils, tulips, and one stubborn hydrangea that refused to bloom last year, but now stood tall, full of color. Nature, I realized, doesn't hold grudges. It just waits for the right conditions to thrive. So had I. 3 months had passed since I created the irrevocable trust. The documents were filed, the power of attorney updated, the living arrangement sealed. No one could accidentally move in. No one could make calls on my behalf. The home and my name were mine again. Claire dropped by that morning, as she often did now. She brought almond croissants and news about her niece's wedding. "So, I heard Tyler moved back to Chicago," she said carefully, slicing the pastry. I nodded without flinching. "Good, that's where he always said he belonged." She paused. "Have you heard from him?" "Not directly, just Hannah's postcards. They came every 2 weeks now. One had a pressed flower inside, and a drawing of a big old house with the caption, 'If I had a house like yours, I'd never leave Grandma alone inside it.' Another one was just a heart, scrawled in pink crayon. I kept them in a little tin box, right next to Mark's journal. That afternoon, I had an appointment with the notary. The final piece, updating my will. The old version left everything to Tyler, not because he'd earned it, but because that's what mothers are trained to do. But now, I had clarity. The new document listed the house and its remaining equity in the trust, with clear instructions. It would pass to a family care foundation upon my passing, specifically to fund housing for elderly women with nowhere else to go. The rest, personal possessions, savings, valuables, would go to individuals I named specifically: Claire, Beverly, even Lily, the young woman who always offered to rake my leaves in the fall without asking for anything in return, and Hannah. She would get the letter and a key. Not to the house, but to the legacy of someone who chose boundaries over bitterness. I signed the document slowly, the pen gliding smoother than I expected. The notary smiled. This is one of the clearest wills I've ever seen. No room for confusion. Good, I'm too old for confusion. We laughed. But it was true. A week later, I hosted a garden lunch. Small. Just 6 of us. We sat under a canopy of flowering dogwood trees, with iced tea and carrot cake and cucumber sandwiches, just like Mark used to make for our anniversaries. I wore the blue dress I hadn't touched in years, the one with tiny white buttons, and a belt that made me feel like someone's leading lady. Claire looked at me and said, "Margaret, you're glowing." "I think that's just peace," I said. She raised her glass. "To peace and to reclaiming your name." We toasted. And for once, I didn't look around to see who was missing. I focused on who was present. That evening, I got another voicemail from Hannah. "Grandma, I showed my mom your lemon bar recipe." She cried. "I think she misses you, but doesn't know how to say it. I just wanted to say, thank you for always loving me, no matter what the adults were doing." My eyes welled up. I didn't call back, but I wrote another letter. "Dear Hannah, love doesn't vanish. It just changes rooms sometimes. If your mother ever wants to talk, I'm here. But until then, know that my heart is always open to you. There's a corner bedroom here that gets the best light in the morning. Maybe one day you'll come see it. Love always, Grandma." I sealed the envelope, placed it with the others in the tin. Not every letter needs to be sent, but every feeling deserves a home. On the first truly warm day of May, I opened all the windows and let the breeze sweep through the house. Curtains danced. Floors creaked. It felt alive again. I brewed some chamomile tea, sat on the front porch, and watched 2 little boys ride their bikes down the street. Their laughter reminded me of Tyler, when he was small, before the weight of expectation, resentment, and entitlement grew bigger than the boy I raised. Maybe he'd come back one day. Maybe he wouldn't. But the door he'd once slammed shut was no longer his to open. Because the truth is, no one can be trusted with your peace more than you can, and no one can write your ending except you. I looked up at the house. The shutters needed repainting. The porch light flickered. The mail slot stuck every time. But it was mine, and for the first time in years, that was more than enough. And I had a plan.